Right, so this is a video on how I'm building my first game as a solo game developer. Now, you probably need to know what type of game I'm making. So I'm trying to make a multiplayer, like kind of asynchronous Autopets style game. So not super complicated in some ways, but pretty challenging in other ways. So obviously, if you're gonna make a game like this, you need to have a pretty good understanding of one, distributed computing, which means you need to understand a lot of things about networking and about cloud resources and programming in general. And that's something that I knew that I wanted to do. Like I always knew that I wanted to make a multiplayer game. So I studied that specifically. And I didn't even attempt to try and make a game for a long time while I was studying that. But now that I feel like I have a decent enough amount of skills, I decided to take a stab at it. And I actually started working on it a while ago, and I've learned a bunch of things. Now, that's only part of it. It's a pretty substantial part because the game is a multiplayer game. That's probably the most demanding part of it. But there are a lot of other elements to the game as well, or to just game dev in general. The game engine, for instance, is something that a lot of people are very interested in. The game engine I chose was Godot, and this is because it was open source, this is because it's free, this is because when I opened up, what's the other one called? There's Unreal, and then I'm like totally blanking now because Unity. I feel like I downloaded Unity and I opened it up and I couldn't resize the text size, the font, the size of the font, and I realized I decided on that almost alone that I was just not going to use the software. Like if they can't even support like different font sizes, I'm not even going to try to do this other stuff. But a lot of it was more so about the open source element, the fact that it's free, the fact that it has a language that sort of emulates Python, which is what I'm strongest at and I'm already utilizing. So anyways, I ended up picking Godot. And it's been like a learning curve to figure out that because I really had basically no game dev experience. I just had general programming experience. And it's really different. The priorities, the limitations, everything is just different when you're working with a game engine and whatnot. So there was a lot to learn there. But probably the one of the biggest things that you're also wondering is how are you getting your art in the game? Every single game is going to require art. And I decided for my first game, I'm just not going to do the art at all. So I've been basically paying a bunch of different people that I've mostly found through freelance and worked with for a while at this point, and just established a working relationship with them. Saw what they could produce. I'm not an artist, so I'm not the best at evaluating it, but I feel like that's been immensely helpful because I can now spend all of my time focused on the things that are already very challenging in terms of just game design and the implementation and all these other things. And so, yeah, realistically, that's the general strategy that I have. So I use Godot. I'm using AWS for cloud, for hosting for the cloud side of things, which is super complicated, honestly. I'm using Python for the actual game engine. Well, I say game engine, but it's like for the actual logic of the game, since it's like super AutoPet style. The way that it works is everybody effectively starts a game, and it's like an asynchronous battler type game archetype. And so people start a game and they'll like buy something, buy a recruit or something. And that goes to a server that causes this big chain reaction of stuff that eventually ends up inside of like a MongoDB database. And and then they read the data from that after it's done using like WebSockets to keep things synchronized. We'll see how it actually works in the end. A lot of this is like partly because, like I said, my main focus was on networking. Knew that I always wanted to make a multiplayer game, partly because those are the ones that interested me the most, but also because it's challenging and it feels like the coolest thing to do from my point of view, as subjective as that is. So anyways, that's what I decided to do. And I haven't really been able to test the system that much. A lot of it is like theoretical in terms of the ability to scale and stuff like that. I don't think that's a huge problem because it's like a winner's problem. If you've got enough traffic playing your game that you're suddenly starting to you can anticipate it up to a certain point, but if you even surpass what you're prepared for, then it's okay. Anyways, though, I don't know. I think it'll probably work. It's not like it is really complicated, honestly. But what else about, yeah, so I'm paying money for art. I'm gonna pay money for servers. I spent a lot of time before I even started my first line of Godot code, like studying networking and doing general programming. I got my idea from effectively playing someone else's game, thinking about it and being like, wait, can I do that? And then sinking my teeth into it more. And then I'm like, oh, I can do that. How much further can I go with this? And then deciding I'm going to just throw out their entire idea, but reuse a lot of the like scaffolding that I use to like effectively replicate some of their idea and just do my own game that's I view it as maybe like a logical successor of something like Super Auto Pets, which was a very effective, like a very successful game in its own right, even though basically like a mobile game. And yeah, and I stopped playing Super Auto Pets after a bit because I didn't like the direction they were going with it at all, which is a large impetus for wanting to just do my own thing. Because I think I can do it better. I think I certainly have some ideas that I think are more in line with what I would want. So on the other hand, I'm basically just trying to build something that I'd like to play. But yeah, and so I got artists to make art, and then I got animators to animate art. And then there was a lot of iterations that I had to go through to actually get it to be like more efficient because there's a lot of art and animations in the game. And when you do that, you're like effectively testing the performance of parts of the engine. Some things that I learned pretty quickly are that you can you can save a lot of space by cutting down the number of frames. So even though the animator may have given you 150 frames, you might want to just cut that into 50 frames because it might not be that like detectable, but the entire thing might be a lot more efficient. I might change some of that stuff in the end, but then I guess I'm rambling now. But basically, the way that I'm building my first video game is just totally off the cuff. I didn't have a very good plan. I just decided to try things. And then as things progressed, I decided to try other things. Like at the beginning, I was like, I'm just going to use I'm going to scrape the art from Super Auto Pets and just use that. And then after I leveled up from that, I was like, all right, I'm going to pay someone a little bit to do a lot of just art. And then after doing that, I was like, I'm going to pay someone to do better art. And then I'm like, I'm going to take one of these pieces of art and I'm going to give it to someone and have them animate it. And I remember the day it was like I was looking at a specific piece of art animated and I had rendered like an entire grid of all these animals. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really interesting to look at. I like looking at it. And I guess I can even show that to some extent. Yeah, I have it here just running. This is what it looks like now. This is a very debug sort of state, but the iteration really it started from something a lot earlier. And oh wait, yeah, you can't, I'm an idiot. I was streaming earlier, and so I thought I had screen sharing. It's probably better. It's probably better that I don't do it yet because I still need to do a lot of work before I actually want to make it public and open. I guess I'll probably do a video about that too, which is what are my thoughts on doing transparent like game dev and like open game dev to the world. But anyways, in conclusion, that's my totally unorganized. I got started because I knew what I wanted to do specifically from a long time ago. The time was pretty right. I got the inspiration from a clear example that I wanted to emulate and maybe extend on and have more control over. And I chose to take care of only part of the problem because I knew that I totally lacked the skills to artistically do anything meaningful. And then I ran with it for a while, and I think it's going to probably be pretty successful, but we'll have to see. It still has a lot of work that I need to put into it. But yeah, so I think it's totally doable as a solo dev, which I guess maybe you would even call this a solo dev because I'm obviously paying people to do big parts of the entire project. But doing all of the code more or less and everything else, yeah, it's definitely possible, but depending on the scale of your game or the scope of it, you need to be like really prepared. If I didn't have that networking experience and I didn't know that I wanted to do networking like a multiplayer based game, I don't know, 7 years ago, I would probably not be in a very good spot right now. And you could arguably say I'm not in a good spot anyways, despite doing that. But yeah, so that's one of the things that a lot of people miss when they're like, oh, the dude who worked on Stardew Valley, he did it in 4 years. And it's maybe, but like maybe he had been programming things that were all relevant, more or less, all of these like pieces of facts and like ways of thinking about programming and computation and stuff like that for years beforehand. Maybe it was actually like 9 years after he started or whatever. I don't know. I know for my situation, it's definitely like I'm not doing this as like my first project or whatever. And I couldn't even imagine trying to. Multiplayer game is very hard to do. I would say it's the highest level challenge, but it depends on what you consider really challenge. There's something that's just time consuming, and then there's something that's like literally cognitively difficult to even orchestrate and get to work like once. I'm pretty jealous of people that have video games that effectively are just, and even in the realm of multiplayer stuff, there's really easy stuff to do, and then there's really hard stuff to do. And then there's these games that effectively do a really bad job of it, but they're still really successful anyways. Ones that kind of maybe come to mind are like, I think I've played Overcooked before, and it's effectively there's networking problems potentially while you're playing all the time. But it's just a kid's party game, so it doesn't really matter if you like jump off the cliff, fall in the water because of something. Like a lot of these solutions they're just not that airtight and they're not really meant to be. So, anyways, I thought I'd give my 2 cents about this since everybody has an opinion about how you should start, what the requirements are. It really just depends on what you want to make. So, thanks for watching.